to this, which is the third in our Wednesday sessions, where we look at a particular issue in education and something that we want to see. We want to be positive, and we want to see positive change, and we want to take affirmative action round. And this one is the second in our series on big changes, hopes for Ed. And it's lovely to see Caitlin in the room again. Hi, Caitlin. You give everybody a wave. So Caitlin's from Big Change. But before we get into the detail of it, just a reminder to everybody in the room, we follow the rules here of heads up sessions. So it's informal, it's relaxed. It is an opportunity for you as leaders in the system to have your voice and to have your say. And we would encourage you, we'll talk about how later on, but we would encourage you not just to have your voice and your say in here, but to really start to think about how you can take that back into action in your organisations, in your schools and in your local communities as well. We don't normally record heads up sessions, as you're well aware, because some of the things that we talk about are quite sensitive, but we do record these. And they will go onto our Heads Up YouTube channel, and we may well, because we always get some absolute gems from some of you in the room, we may well cut out clips from things that people have said, the very passionate, really spot on stuff that people are coming up with. If we think there's one of those that's worth sort of clipping into a short clip for social media, we may do that as well. So just to let you know that, whether that makes you moderate your language or your behaviour or anything like that, it's entirely up to you. It might not, it may well do. I think that's all of the framing. What I haven't said is Heads Up, if you don't know, I think everybody in the room does, but if you don't know, Heads Up is it's a national network of support for head teachers, past, present and future. So we are all about providing one-to-one support for head teachers who are, under pressure, under stress, being challenged by the education system, and have either left and moved into something else, and we help them with that, or our key aim is to keep head teachers in the system by providing weekly heads up support sessions and having that impact. That's what we want to do. Alongside the individual support are the weekly sessions, and then this is a sort of third part of our mission, really, is to really start to get heads up collectively and collaboratively co-constructing the education system that they would like to see, that grassroots thing about being the change that we would like to see in our education system, recognizing the fact that the people that we might expect to help us with that change quite often fail to do so, so therefore we may as well take it on ourselves. So that's very much where we're coming from, and welcome to those of you who are just joining as well. So Big Changes Hopes for Ed number 1 was all about a conversation about education. What is education and what is education for? And how can we, as leaders in the system, how can we take that back into our communities, and how can we really start to engage our communities in that conversation about what education is? And actually, when we talk about that, we're not just talking about the parental community and the student community and the pupil community, we're also talking about ourselves and our staff. What do we think education is for? We're incredibly values aligned in the Heads Up network, and we talk about leading with values, and we talk about being the leaders that we set out to be, which often is not about Progress 8 schools or SAT schools or phonics schools or all of those things that the system tells us education should be about. And we talk about that every week in our weekly sessions. And this is a real opportunity to get under the skin of that. And Hopes for Ed number 2, the heading for it is all young people set to thrive in life, not exams. And for me, there's 2 phases to that. It's recognizing that actually, I do genuinely think sometimes we forget this, but recognizing that children are actually, they're existing in their life whilst they are at school. So it's not a life that's going to begin when they're 16 and they've got that piece of paper with 9 grades on it, or however many it is. They're actually living a life while they're in the school setting. So we're setting up to thrive in the life that they're living and the life that they're going to move on into. So all young people set to thrive in life, not exams. The sort of subheading for it, which you will have seen, is essentially looking at the curriculum that we're offering in our schools and really starting to think about that through the frame of, what does that mean? If we are setting children up to thrive in life, what does that look like in our school settings? And it sort of leans heavily on, and I would encourage you to take a look at the OECD 2030 learning framework, which very much focuses on the knowledge, skills, attitudes and values that we would hope to give our children and develop in our children and grow in our young people, and using those knowledge, skills, attitudes and values to shape the future. So really thinking about actually how can what we're doing with the young people in our schools at the moment help to shape the future of society and the world, and whether that's in a very local community setting or whether that goes well beyond that. We're really delighted this evening. We've got a couple of guest speakers just to get the conversation going and get things moving along. Our first one I will introduce now, and then I'll come to our second one a little bit later on. We're really delighted that we've got Emma Adams joining us. Emma, if you want to give everybody a wave. So Emma is leading on a significant piece of work around curriculum change at the British School of Brussels, which I'm really grateful and thankful that I'm doing a bit of work with alongside and supporting that process. And it struck me that it'd be really great to get Emma to come and talk this evening about the work that they're doing at the British School of Brussels around, because they are using the OECD learning framework to inform the work that they're doing with their curriculum. And the British School of Brussels, I won't say too much because otherwise I might take away some of Emma's words, but the British School of Brussels is an all-through setting. It's a primary and secondary setting in Brussels, but it sort of exists as two schools on one campus. And one of the things that they're really working on is this notion of one schoolness. So they're treating it very much as one school journey, right from sort of nursery and early years foundation stage, right the way through to 18-year-olds. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Emma and allow her to talk about why they've used the learning framework as the basis for the curriculum change that they're working on and planning to work on over the next several years. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, James. First of all, if you hear any noise in the background, it is because my children are being put to bed at the moment by their dad. So that's
same here.
But thank you so much for inviting me. I feel really privileged and actually quite nervous, especially seeing up all these new faces keep popping up on the screen in front of me. I'm not a senior leader at the school, although and I'll talk a little bit about our leadership structure, because that has actually been a driving force for some of the curriculum changes that we want to make at the school. But as James said, we are an international school, but I feel, having worked in other international schools and in the UK system, we're a little bit unique, because most of our children, first of all, although we're a British international school, only 30% of our students are British. We're very, very international. But most of our children come from local schools around the world. And because of where we are, obviously in the heart of Europe, we have, UN families, we have the EU diplomat families. So we have a really wide international community from Africa, Asia, as far as Japan and Korea, and American families. We have military families because of the NATO base. So it's a real mix. And it's a very transient community as well, for pupil-wise, not staffing-wise, but mainly for pupils. And we are quite privileged in that from a primary school perspective, we do not follow although we follow the national curriculum all the way through the school, we don't do the SATs. So we don't have that end of, we don't have that end of Key Stage 2 external assessment. However, that brings its own challenges, actually, because we sometimes find that we're always looking, what are we benchmarking, and where can, what can our Year 7 teachers use to for those children that do go through the school, which is it's at least 50% that leave, go from Year 6 into Year 7. And part of that is, has also really made us look at the curriculum that we're offering. As James said, we are really pushing for a one school approach to everything. It spent a long time, the school, about 8 years, being very, very separate. And one of our challenges with any of our initiatives is under the one school umbrella, because we're still, you know, staff naturally just see themselves as primary school or secondary school or early years. I mean, even the division between Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, or lower primary and upper primary, is there. So with that, under the umbrella of wanting to drive under a one school approach and wanting to take advantage of the position that we're in, we opted to really look and see whether the curriculum that we offer the children is one that they really deserve. Does it really represent our community, for one? You know, we were teaching a very traditional British curriculum, but our community is not British, it's very international, and our students are global students. They come to us and then they may go back to their home country, but we want to make sure that when they're with us, that we are giving them that opportunity to be global citizens, so they can take that forward. And when we first set this up, it was the OECD 2030 Future Skills Framework that really inspired that move towards creating a more creative curriculum. And I put some a PowerPoint together, but I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint, so I'll try not to focus too much on it. Can I just share my screen as it is? Have I got to do? Yeah, can I do that? Let me see if I can find it. It doesn't seem to be there though.
Kate, I think Kate's just making you co-host, I think, which should give you the...
Yeah, I can see one of my screens, but not... That's not the right one.
You're a co-host now, Emma, so...
Yep. Okay. Let me go back to it. Sorry, everyone, have a drink.
They will, undoubtedly.
Oh, let me try and do this one. This is not the one I want to do, but I'll try and open the other one that I've got. This one. So I hope everyone can see that. And I think it's really important as well to state that when we embarked on a curriculum change and to start this process, we knew that it would take time. We didn't want to rush into it. So we gave ourselves, I think, a 3-year window. But then because of COVID, we extended that time frame. And before COVID happened, though, we actually picked this statement from the OECD document, which actually is even more relevant now than it was back then, because it talks about how your curriculum needs to be able to cope with volatile and uncertain changes and situations that we're faced with every day. And that's why the OECD framework really emphasizes the need for a curriculum that can shift and shape according to what is presented to you. You know, and we know that all these things, whether it's climate change, you know, whether it is a pandemic, these things are happening more and more often, and our curriculum needs to be able to envelop them and deal with them and be able to continue running despite what's happening. So actually we used this statement as a provocation when we first started the review with all staff, to try and you know, to draw them in. I think you can probably you'll be able to watch the video yourselves. If you go onto the website, there's a really nice 2-minute clip of what the learning compass is all about. But what's really nice is this is another key statement which we've really taken, is that it's time to shift the focus of our students from more hours for learning to quality learning time. So that is what we're really looking at, is the quality of the curriculum now. We didn't just use the OECD framework though, and we actually used the Big Change document to help in this, because that provided more evidence as to why we needed to actually change our education. And the one part of that document that we shared with all staff were the figures, because it presents lots of figures about what do businesses think of education, what do they think about the students they're receiving, how do teachers feel about what they're teaching. And it was really useful data to see those numbers and percentages to make us think, well, are our students ready for life when they leave us? But the other really important framework that we have used to guide our curriculum is the UNESCO 4 Pillars, which is from 1996, the Dolores Report, which basically outlined a framework that you can pin your curriculum to, into 4 pillars. So learning to know, so that's your, you know, your broad general knowledge, or both aspects of a disciplinary knowledge, procedural knowledge, how it's going to help you to access the, you know, the learning that you need to access life. Then you've got the learning to do, which is your more your skills for learning, the skills that you need to cope in a future. And then you've got your learning to live together, which really looks at as well community and the voice, student agency, and then the learning to be, which is our social emotional aspect, and we term it relational learning across the school, which is how do we interact with each other, how do we interact with ourselves first of all, how do we interact with each other, and then how do we interact with a wider community. So these 4 pillars, which really are mirrored as well in the learning framework, those have now helped us create a set of principles that we are using to pin our curriculum to. We also thought about our school, we have our set of guiding statements. I'm sure, you know, every school has a set of guiding, a version of guiding statements. You know, what we want our children to be confident, to be curious, resilient, respectful. So we wanted something that embodied that, and we felt that the OECD learning framework and the 4 pillars really did that for us. So this took us on to our, you know, this was the catalyst for this curriculum journey, which was a review. We decided we would review the curriculum in order to, as it says there, promote high quality learning and curriculum provision. We had 3 clear goals, which was we wanted a coherent curriculum. We wanted to see continuity of learning, so that from early years all the way through to post-16, we have a very coherent sense, you know, it makes sense, and it builds on what's been taught before, and it goes deeper. We also wanted to inject creativity, innovation, but we didn't want it to be just for the namesake. We wanted it to be real. We wanted this to be real learning that would inspire the children and allow them to take it forward. We actually, instead of looking at, though, a curriculum change from early years to post-16, we decided to go right into the middle, and we decided to bridge the upper primary and early secondary years. So we went for years 5 to 8 and have decided to try and create a curriculum vision for our years 5 to 8. The reason being is that, you know, obviously it's for transition. The other reason in that as I said, we don't have a formal exam or assessment at the end of year 6, and then again they don't actually do any formal examinations in year 7 and 8. So we thought this is right. These year groups are ripe for change and are right for us to try and work with and mould. And we'd already started trying to build some links between our secondary and primary departments, where in maths in particular we had one of our secondary school maths teachers who came to teach in the primary school, and the primary teachers would go and watch maths lessons in the secondary school. And we've really tried to get the departments from secondary coming into primary and vice versa, to look at what language do you use, you know, how are you teaching? Oh, it's not so different actually, or it's really different. Oh, we didn't realize you already taught that in year 5, so maybe we don't need to teach it in year 7. It's really been a powerful way to open up dialogue. Obviously it's easier for us because we're on the same campus, so we don't have to go to a different site to access each other's schools. But you would have thought that we were completely separate. You would have thought we were on the other side of town from each other, you know, 2 or 3 years ago. There wasn't that interaction at all between the 2 schools. As I said before, you know, we've really looked at this being a long-term process, and actually breaking it up into phases has been really important. And we're only now just beginning phase 2. And phase 1, which is where we started, was where we just did lots of foraging. We just did lots of exploring and reading. You know, we looked at the OECD documents, we looked at the big change documents, we looked at the 4 pillars, we went to the curriculum masterclasses in the UK, we went, you know, we tried to really involve ourselves in anything that was curriculum related. We just wanted to get as much information as possible. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the how, because you'll see that where it says who, it says professional learning partners and review group. And it's really important that I come back to that, because that, as I said at the beginning, has really been the driving force behind why it's going the way it's going. But this phase 1 was a really important part of our curriculum review, and it took a whole year of doing that, and slowly getting groups of people on board, small groups at a time, to then roll it out to other people across the school. Back to those. What happened after the first year was that we pulled together all of our knowledge based around our guiding statements, and we've created our first set of principles. And within these first set of principles, you'll just see really almost what the OECD framework is saying and what the 4 pillars are saying. So we really, you know, our guiding statements are in the middle there. What we're really trying to do is we want, you know, each of these 4 aspects of this model have equal balance. We want across the curriculum. So we've got that coherent and credible curriculum. We want the creativity and innovation, which can come from, you know, language, come from technology, from outdoor learning, problem solving. We want active citizenship. We want our students to be change agents, and then we want good relationships to underpin as well and be within all of that. So all of these, is really important that they're all seen as having equal weighting. So that's really where we've got to so far. Where we're at next is now looking at, now we know all of that, what does that look, what could that look like? So now we're going to spend another year looking at, and James is helping us a little bit with this in one particular area in the within our science department, is thinking about what, you know, based on that model, now look at what we're actually doing. Do we feel that we have those 4 aspects within our current curriculum? And then where might we create links between subjects to get that deeper learning going? So we've started a project in year 8 where geography and science are aligning 2 units of work. So what they would normally do around rainforests and the wetlands, and in science, what they would do around biodiversity, I think it is. They never used to be taught at the same time. And now they've got together and said, oh, well, actually, if you're teaching the wetlands and we're teaching biodiversity, why don't we teach it at the same time under the umbrella of the Amazon as like an umbrella theme? But that's just for the children, to help them make the connections between the 2. And it's working really well. So we've kind of done a little pilot project there, which we need to review. So we're seeing where else we can do that. That's what we're going to be doing. By the end of this year, we hope that we'll be able to share some practice and that we'll have
maybe some non-negotiables in place. I don't know, because of COVID, it's obviously changed a lot about how much staff can actually, it sounds exciting, but we also understand that in these times, the intensity of these times, some staff just don't have the capacity to suddenly go, yeah, I really want to change the curriculum now. And that's okay, it's fine. You know, we've really taken a step back. Some other people, I'll leave that, you can see James there, but what we also did in this first phase is we also connected with people that we felt could help us. So James has been somebody who can help us to look at, you know, high quality teaching and learning. And we went to Deborah Kidd, who is helping us with our creativity and innovation. We've also used David Leet, who works at Newcastle University and does a lot of work based around project-based learning and student agency. And he's been really helpful in talking to us about
you know, again, reinforcing this, what does a curriculum need to be? It shouldn't just be knowledge, it needs to be balanced. Children need to be able to use knowledge. They need to put their learning into real life situations. So we're really, as often as we can, you know, giving this message to staff. And Julie McGrain, also, she's been working with us. She's been connecting, looking at the progression of skills across primary and secondary from a humanities perspective, trying to join up thinking between history and geography, especially in a secondary school, because in the primary we teach, you know, humanities as an area rather than geography and history separately at BSB anyway. I'll skip over the phase 3, phase 4, because what I really think might be valuable for you to provoke some discussion is why I think it's working. And it doesn't come down to the fact that we've pulled the OECD framework and said, this is great, this is going to work for us. It actually comes because about 4 or 5 years ago, we actually underwent quite a significant cultural shift across the school, in that we moved from being a very hierarchical top-down model to a very distributed leadership model. So our current head teacher, who is head of both the primary and the secondary, had a vision for a professional learning community at the school that would help roll out projects and changes linked to the whole school development plan. So you saw mention before about PLPs, and what PLPs are. They are professional learning partners. So what we did about 3-4 years ago now is we advertised to the whole staff for members of staff who would be interested in being a team to create a roadmap for professional learning at the school by being pathfinders and just being given, this wasn't a paid role, this is just, they were given time, they were given, you know, maybe a 1-hour slot per week off timetable. And during that time, for 2 years, they were given time and space to connect with other members of staff, to follow an area of interest. So we had 2 members of staff who wanted to explore students as change agents. And so they just had that time to be able to do that. And the team, you know, so I think there were 12 of us in the beginning, and we would meet regularly to share. We started, it was all about connecting with the staff. And what's happened with this way of working is that instead of the curriculum review being a top-down approach, it's actually been a ground-up movement. It's come from the staff, and it's the staff who are leading the review. It's not the senior leadership team. So the pressure is off, in a way, I suppose. The pressure is a little bit off of our head and the senior leadership team. They're not constantly having to create this. What they need to do is facilitate, and they need to provide the time and space for those teachers who've been, you know, allocated time to roll this out, to do the research, to connect with staff, to hold the meetings, to organise the professional learning days, to connect with the external help. And that's really why this curriculum review, I would say, is working. It also could be a reason why, you know, we're always aware that should that change, then it could mean that it might not work. You know, it only takes a little bit of a shift in one of our professional learning partners not working in that way. You know, our ways of working have been really important to this. And there it just says that, you know, we've really made it clear that collaboration, careful listening, the meaningful feedback, and thinking about ourselves, not just ourselves, but others and the organisation, is really key to driving any of our projects forward. And the diagram on the left there is to show, kind of shows the areas that our professional learning partners are involved in. So they're involved in research and development, they're involved in review groups such as the curriculum review. Some of them are there to support and share practice, and some of them are looking at mentoring and looking at teacher training and so on. So I'm going to stop there because I think I've probably said far too much, but feel free to ask any questions or to use it as a discussion point. That's what it's there for.
Emma, thank you ever so much. And I'm just going to sort of pull out the things that resonate for me, but then we'll take a quick whistle stop around the room. There's loads of lovely things in the chat, actually, that people have said, and a lot of what you've said about the work that's happening at BSB has really resonated with people. But I think the things that strike me about the work that you're doing is it's the intentionality, it's the fact that it's being given time, it's not being rushed, it's not, you know, the short-termism that sort of strides across our education landscape like a spectre. Everything must be done in 6 months. Transformation must happen immediately. You know, you've given it, you've phased it, you've given it an appropriate time span to get it right. You know, the co-construction, the collaboration, the involving people. But I think the thing that I love is the fact that you've taken that sort of central tenet of, you know, all young people set to thrive in life with that future aspect. So actually it's thriving in the life that they're going to go towards rather than thriving for a life that used to exist.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key difference, is actually what are the challenges that our planet is facing? What are the challenges that we're facing in our communities and as a society and as countries that work together? And actually let's create young people who are going to solve those problems and be able to solve those problems, rather than creating young people who can sit exams and then get a job and sit in that job for the rest of their life. You know, it's such an outdated model in terms of, and that's fundamentally because of the richness of your community and the diversity of your community. That's, you know, you set out chiefly to avoid doing that because you recognize the challenges of having that diverse community. But that, you know, that's my takeaways. I'll be really interested. Mandy, I'm going to come to you first because you put a couple of lovely things in the chat. Mandy, what sort of, we'll just do a quick sort of 1 minute, what resonated with you around the room. So Mandy, if I come to you first, what really resonated with you from that?
Thank you very much, James, and thank you very much for that fantastic presentation. What resonated for me is the links that you've made to the curriculum being there to develop learning in a systematic way, that it wasn't an arbitrary, you know, collection of thoughts or just trying to plug gaps or find information and make it work for whatever reason. And it was a processed approach, being given good quality time and the investment in persons by allowing them time off timetable to think about this, the years that you have put into it, I think is absolutely fantastic. And the other thing to that is, I think there just needs to be a greater link between the Sustainable Development Goals and what the future is all about. I think there's a lot of disconnect, and I know I have a background in it, but I think there's a real mismatch between what education is for now and what education is supposed to be preparing our children for in the future. And I don't know how we go about doing it. Well, I would have said that 2 minutes ago, but having seen the presentation, I think your pathway is absolutely fantastic. So thank you for sharing it.
And I think, Randy, thank you for that input. I mean, I think that the thing that strikes me about that is actually there's a model with what's happening at BSB. And actually, indeed, Kelly, I'll come to you next. What's happened in Wales, where and indeed in Scotland, where again they've been really intentional.
I'm not sure what's happened, James. You've gotten very, very low.
What, in my seat, Mandy, or volume wise? Can everybody else hear me all right? Everybody else is nodding. Mandy,
sorry, your voice.
Sorry, it might be at your end. I think volume wise, Mandy. Everybody else seems to be okay. But you know, the changes in Wales and Scotland, and that again, that intentionality. But actually, can we create a professional learning partnership as head teachers in England, and then lead it from the ground up in the way that Emma's described as happening at BSB? Kelly, do you just want to give us a quick overview of, you know, lots of stuff of that has resonated with you? Do you want to give us a quick sort of response to that and what you're doing in Wales?
Yeah, definitely. And I've been involved with the curriculum reforms in Wales over the last 4 years, and everything that you've discussed today, which was music to my ears, Emma, is what we've developed over the last 4 years, because we started with the OECD competencies, the global competencies for inclusive world, the 4 dimensions for learning, and all of that rich, you know, sort of wealth of research, along with looking at international models. We were able then to apply what was working well, but to a Welsh context, you know, and being very specific about, you know, it isn't a one size fits all, this needs to be bespoke for our, you know, and then breaking that down and disseminating it further to local and regional level as well. But yeah, like I said, you know, I feel that curriculum reforms coming in 2022 are very much echoing the messages that you're giving today. And it just reconfirmed for me that we are on the right track. You know, the last 4 years has been a slog, as you can imagine, but it's been absolutely, you know, worthwhile, and it's such a exciting transformational opportunity, the competencies now that we're going to be able to develop in the learners and making learning purposeful. So just to reflect upon, you know, Successful Futures by Graham Donaldson, he talks about the need for change and the case for change. At one point I could quote the page numbers, but I'm a little bit rusty at the moment. But yeah, look, we you know, you look at chapter 5, it talks about pedagogy, it talks about the fundamental importance of professional learning and collaboration and networking in line with the schools as the organisation model. So like I said, I can't reiterate enough, it's just really, you know, again, just giving me that, you know, that motivation to know that we're on the right track and exciting times ahead. So yeah.
I'll just say, Kelly, but we used the Welsh because we looked at, like you just said, we looked at education systems around the world. You know, we looked at who was doing something. We looked at Finland, we looked at Singapore, we looked at the Belgian system, we looked at Wales and Scotland, and the Welsh system. Everybody was like, oh, we love it. That's what we want to be doing. And that, you know, and that again, it was like, yes, that's what we're aiming. It was trying to get together as many examples of where it's happening and seeing that commonality, you know, and like you, Mandy said, those sustainable goals. And for us, having different groups of staff working on different areas of curriculum has really helped. So while I'm working on the nitty-gritty of the curriculum review, 2 other professional learning partners are only looking at students as change agents, only looking at that. So they're looking at the sustainable development goals, they're looking at, you know, anything they can find, and they're you know, looking at the 100 Ed stuff, and they're pulling it all together so that when the time is right, which is coming close, then we'll pull that into the curriculum. So we're not doing it, it's not the same people doing everything. That's been really important, I think.
And I think there was 4 words, sorry, there was time, trust, technology and thinking together. And they're the 4 main factors that in anything that you sort of try to, you know, implement, they're the things. And in honesty, we've got a 5-year plan for implementation of curriculum. You have to spend that time, isn't it, reflecting? So yeah, definitely.
And Kelly, just to pick up on it, I think I captured the 4 of them for the chat: time, trust, thinking, and technology.
Time, trust, technologies, and thinking together. So time, trust, technologies, and thinking together.
I don't want responses to this, but just a reflection for you all. Have a think about the English education system and think about which ones of those are missing. Is quite a good way of looking at it. I would say that trust, we talked about trust before in this room. Trust is definitely not there. We're very rarely given the time to do things and do them really, really well. And probably the thinking together, that probably links to the time one. Actually, when do we get the time to think together? But you know, maybe that's something that we can do as part of the heads up. But Kelly, thank you very much. Zena, apart from wanting a job at British School of Brussels, what resonated with you, Zena?
Oh, what didn't resonate with me, to be honest with you? I've actually packed my bags, Emma, so be up from the airport soon. I just love the idea of this cross-working, the collaborative working, how it's not top-down. I've loved the distributed leadership and the fact that it's all intentional work, and the learning to know, do, live together, to be. Honestly, my notepad is full now. I have to say that if we can just adopt a quarter of what you guys are doing, it would make a huge impact to our system and our curriculums and our ways of working in our system. And so I'm a huge advocate for collaborative working and the cross-curricular idea. I've been saying this for years. And I remember when I first applied for my first senior role, and I didn't get the job because they said I was being too unrealistic. And one of the ideas was the fact that we would have members of staff you know, work really closely with our feeder schools. So our maths and our English staff would go into our feeder schools, have a look at what they're doing. Maybe we could support in some way. Could they come and see what we were doing? And actually knowing what every department was teaching and how we could connect them in some way or another, I think could be really powerful learning experience. And then to add on top of that, to add creativity and innovation, wow, you know, what a fantastic educational experience our children would have.
Thank you, Zena, for that. And last one before we introduce our second speaker of the evening, Julia. What resonated with you, Julia?
I'm a bit the same, really. I've got all sorts written down. Because I've been in a place today where I was looking at Barrett's levels of consciousness, just thinking, you know, the time that's given to this to ensure that it's a safe environment to try things and to develop things, that empowerment, that building of relationships in the staff so that everybody's got a part in it, and then the organisation over time allows for true transformation. And I think that was just inspirational, really, that culture, and I wrote in the chat, you know, building that learning culture in the staff is going to pay off dividends with the kids. So yeah, amazing, just blown away, really.
Well, thank you, Julia, and once again, Emma, thank you very much for that input. You've clearly set hairs racing amongst the room, so that's really fantastic. And thank you everybody for your responses. I'd like now to introduce our second speaker. So Hannah Weiner is joining us, and she's come. There's a couple of people in the room from Reclaim. Hannah's come sort of very highly recommended from Reclaim, which is another big change partner and big change changer and collaborator. And we thought it'd be really nice, so, you know, having had the sort of the BSB, the sort of school level input, the leadership level input, we thought it'd be really nice to sort of balance that then with, you know, the viewpoint from a young person. So Hannah, I'm actually slightly worried I'm going to get your age right now. I think Hannah is 19.
Yep, 19.
Oh, spot
Yeah.
on. So okay, that's good. So Hannah is 19. So she's just come out of our school system, and we thought it'd be really interesting. And Hannah does, I say, all sorts of stuff. She's currently in the middle of sort of collaborating on and producing a book called In Words. She works in the theatre. She's an activist. There's so many different words to describe Hannah. But you know, we thought it'd be really great if Hannah sort of said, actually, you know what, this was my experience, and you know, this is how I think it set me up for life, and this is the change that I would like to see in the system. So Hannah's going to give us. Hannah said to me, she said, I talk quite a lot. I'm really comfortable talking. I was like, right, okay, well, you'll fit into the room really, really well, and that will not be an issue at all. So because we all like to have a good chat. So Hannah, you're really welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. Can you give us, Hannah, inspire the room, give us a 5 minute sort of rant, soapbox, personal perspective on education?
Amazing. Emma, that was so amazing to see that, you know, people in positions like all yourselves want to make that change, especially me being a young person. It's so hard to see behind the scenes from teachers, so it's nice to kind of hear the conversation that happens. I wanted to first off say I'm not all young people, and as much as I represent young people, I am also white, I'm also atheist. I don't represent all young people, and it's so important to involve different young people in these conversations, because my experience as a young woman, as a young gay woman, is very different to maybe a young black man. So that's definitely something I wanted to kind of say, that experiences will differ. So I left secondary school in 2017, and I left college in 2019. And while in high school, I was in every bottom set you could imagine. Every bottom set you could put me in, I was in it. And it was a very weird experience for me, because I always kind of loved school. I never hated education. I hated the system that told me I was in bottom set when I knew I had so much more to give than that mindset. And I feel like when you tell young people this is the set you are in, it's a definition. And I'm very lucky to have such incredible parents and such incredible friends who encourage me writing my book now, which is all about giving other young people accessible role models from different ethnic backgrounds, from the LGBT community, from things like that, to present these role models especially. But like I said, in school,
it was very hard to kind of get out of that bottom set mind. And one thing I wanted to say today, which is I think sums up my whole experience in education, is on my GCSE parents' evening, my maths teacher sat in front of my mum and my dad, and she went, when you fail your GCSEs, and she kind of went on this run, and she gave me a booklet on the front in big bold letters, when you fail your GCSEs. And then I ended up in results day coming out with 11 GCSEs, A star to C. So definitely the way that they didn't expect that to go. And that kind of gave me the oomph to go, all right, maybe I can do something with this. Then I went on to college to study BTEC acting. I ended up with triple distinction star, and I got a Pearson's Award because I got full marks in the whole course, which was obviously very exciting and very kind of on paper, a very kind of good achievement. But one thing I think we need to kind of separate for young people is this idea of institutional education being the pinnacle of education. I left college with good grades, and on paper I looked like the perfect person to go to university. And because of mental health reasons, I had to decline my application because I was so ill from practically selling my soul to education to get these grades, to work so hard. And I remember on results day, I kind of sat there and went, what do we do now? And that's one thing that education never prepares you for, is when you're left with your own thoughts and you're left without that 9-to-5 structure, what do you do? And I'm so lucky and very blessed to have people like Reclaim, but also the Contact Theatre, which is where I'm writing my book. And hopefully that if anyone wants to hear about that, about the book, it's a quite exciting project. And that's hopefully going to students to not keep them in the same position that I was in. But I definitely think for young people, is humility is our curse for us. It's a curse for us to teachers, but it's a blessing within our own community. I feel like my humility definitely as a young person around other young people was amazing, because it was, you know, I got these grades, but I definitely didn't have this perception of myself as an A-star student, because I was in bottom set for so long that I'll never see myself, no matter how much work I do freelancing now, I'll never see that. But for teachers, my humility was the perfect thing to prey on and go, well, work harder, we'll work a bit harder and you can get this, and work a bit harder and you can get this. And taking advantage of that in young people is one massive experience I had. And I think, you know, is just, it's wrong, as obviously I don't need to say that that's wrong for it to be wrong. But definitely relatable role models, I think, is the main thing for me as a young, at the time in the closet woman. I definitely was surrounded by, as amazing as teachers are, I had a 60-year-old white cis straight man telling me about my mental health problems, when in all reality that's not his fault that he was employed for that role, but it's the wrong role for him to be in. If you're going to connect to young people, it's amplifying the voices of other young role models, you know, bringing in young teaching figures. I remember I had about 2 teachers who are around 30, in their 30s, and even then at 16, you know, you think 30 is the end. You think you have to start planning your will at 30. So definitely to have, you know, an old gent tell me that, you know, my mental health was a facade, and it was something that I could cure if I just had a bottle of water and a bath. So definitely relatable role models, I think, young role models, and involving young people in employment. I feel like one thing that I saw recently was a school, whether it was an institutional school or just like a random drama school thing, was they had 4 kids with them when they were employing their staff, and they said on their panel, so the guy would have the interview, or the lass would have the interview, and the young people would also be a massive part of deciding who is teaching them. And I think that's such a big, you know, it's something that everyone can adopt. You know, if we can't give young people, here you go, here's your teacher, they're gonna teach you, but not know anything about you, anything about the way you process. And for me personally, I have a lot of learning disabilities and mental health conditions, and I definitely, that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And I feel like when I went to school, which wasn't even that long ago, is a massive thing. I did a teaching session recently at Pendleton College, and I kind of just said, talk to me, like, don't be PG, just tell me everything. And it's so sad to hear the same things getting repeated, and that nothing in terms of higher power in the government is changing. Because if I'm hearing the same things 3 years later, where are we planning on going with it? But it's so nice to hear that from you, Emma, that, you know, you have that process in there to you know, inspire people. I guess there was a lot of things I was going to kind of say and stuff like that, but I think my main thing is this idea of institutional education being different from being educated and being an educator. If, like I said, as much as my grades are a big achievement, and it was a proud moment to be able to say, for me, from a working class background, with my dad being a French polisher, my mum being a dinner lady, it was great to have that on paper. But leaving institutes and living my life, it did nothing. I worked at the local chip shop, you know, for 2 years, and my triple distinction star in mask work on stage wasn't doing any, it wasn't preparing me for the 60-year-old who was going to shout homophobic slurs over a counter at me. No one prepares you for those situations, and I think that's one thing we need to focus on: education as a curriculum, but education as a young person and turning into a young adult. I think in my last 2 years, I've been freelancing. I've been writing my book, as I've said, which is a massive part of what I do. Doing a lot of environmentally friendly work. I've just been offered today a role at the Chinese Centre of Contemporary Art to do some art with some other young people and stuff. And they're the type of things that I've learnt more, buckets, we're talking buckets more than I ever did in school, because school gives, and it's lovely to see the change, and obviously there is change happening, but when I was at school, it was very, you will do this, or you will do this, or you will do nothing. And this kind of idea that I was being told you will work at McDonald's, and then a year later I was working in a chip shop doing nothing, going out with my mates on the weekend, and you think, oh, I have become what they said. I am just working here. And it's this kind of this dehumanization of people who do work retail and who do have to work these jobs. And I'm so lucky that I am now in a position, as much as I still do work retail, that I have a pretty good income off the work that I do like this. But I think just honesty, is what I'm getting at. I think to kind of facade, I think, in my opinion, a lot of teachers had this facade of, I am a teacher and you are a student, and I know it's Mr. Wormwood. I feel like it's a Mr. Wormwood thing, that I'm big, you're small, I'm right, you're wrong, and that's not doing anything for anyone, and it's certainly not doing anything for young people, because the amount of young people I speak to who, especially with the A-level results situation, the current university situation, and I'm hoping to go to university next year. I've been offered a couple of places, but to hear, no one's listening. We bring young people into sessions, and we let them talk, and that's as far as that goes. And I feel like what Reclaim does really well is just being so honest and being so open, and not treating young people as this kind of token. I feel like a lot of my working life, I was a token as a young woman, as a young gay woman. It was kind of this idea, we've got it and they're there, but their voices are mashed up in the corner, but we've got it, and that's all that matters. And I think one thing that educational institutes should really kind of adopt is praising those students and tailoring the learning to those students. The experience of a young Black man when he leaves those gates is going to be worlds away from the white young woman who lives on a council estate. But they're never going to be similar. And I think the more we start to kind of notice difference in young people is the minute young people don't hate education. I feel like we've got this the Sun love to bang on going, young people hate education, young people don't want to learn, and it's so far from the case. And on paper I look like I don't care. I look like I've left college, I've gone to work at Chippy, that's it. When in reality, the freelance work that I'm doing that necessarily wouldn't go on paper if I wasn't writing it has taught me more in being a young person, and how to finance my life, how to react when someone is just grinding on your gears. It's not a put up and shut up world anymore, and kind of teaching young people that it is a put up and shut up world is so outdated and so ridiculous to kind of suggest that you can. And I think with access to more young relatable role models is the start of that, I guess, and presenting people who have been in that situation. And it's not necessarily a teacher's fault. They've been employed to do key stage 3 English and then also the mental support. That's not their fault necessarily, but I think there needs to be a change in the system of reducing the roles that certain teachers have to play and putting the responsibility on others who are going to help rather than just saying they have that position. You know, we've got someone who helps mental health. Doesn't make it a good position, doesn't make what they're doing correct. It just means they've got it. And it's this idea of being a token, and of, oh, if we say we've got it, then we don't have to answer the questions later if we are a racist institute or a homophobic institute. And I definitely think that for me in school, if I was kind of given these role models, I maybe would have had a different line. Who knows? I maybe would have ended up doing this, but I definitely wouldn't have suffered as much mentally as I did in school. And like I said, you know, the humility of young people is a blessing within their own age group and a curse to anybody older than them, and to kind of, it can be manipulated and used by whoever wants to use that. And I think just making everything a bit more human and making everything a bit more, you know, I still go home to my family and I still go home to the reality of life, especially in a pandemic. You know, there's something we can all finally relate to, is if we're going to, you know, if anything's going to break this divide, it's we've all gone through a global pandemic. It was affected people differently, but there's not a single person on earth who's not heard of COVID-19 now. And I think that is, you know, it's something we've all experienced, and all it takes is, I guess, one person. For me, I distinctly remember the first person in education, funnily enough, it wasn't in an institute, it was at the Contact Theatre, a lady called Rose Surgeon, and she was the first person to go, yeah, let's do something. And everything went, you know, my life in January changed overnight, and now it's so amazing to be able to speak at these events and kind of share, I guess, my story. It's not really much of my story, it's a universal one, but just manipulated in the way that my life's gone based on the area I live in. But once again, I'm not all young people. I'm not, you know, my answers aren't answers, they're just statements. And if people want to agree with them, fantastic. But I definitely think continuing to listen to different young people, varieties of young people, and not just, you know, this type of young person. Every young person is different, and just humanizing education a bit more. I think students will want to open up, they'll want to do better, they'll want to succeed. If you're being told you're bottom set, unfortunately, friends from home who I, you know, value very much, I've seen them go down the path of drug and drink addiction, and kind of have spent their life on various government benefits and things. And I spoke to one of them recently, and it's one thing I wanted to say today before I end, because I realised I've probably gone over your time. But when I spoke to them recently, when I was writing the book, and I just wanted to ask, and I was like, you know, how is life? And they were just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know, because I'm such a wandering figure. There's one thing I like to say is, when we tell young people you are a bottom set student, they become just figures in this big society we have, and they become the lost figures. And I wrote a piece about this recently. I wrote a play based upon Thomas Thornycroft, who was a sculptor, and about his life, and I kind of based it on myself, of being told you're bottom set, you're going to become a wandering figure, and you're going to become this horrible idea that you're taught, that if you do work at McDonald's, then that's it. And that's obviously not it. I worked in a disgusting greasy chippy, being called all sorts of things, and now I do this. So definitely having those role models, them being relatable role models who can use their experience to help people, and not using the humility of young people to gain results or gain statistics, because we're not statistics. We're not tick boxes. We're not trophies that you can kind of put up on the wall and go, we have an ethnic minority and someone who's gay and someone who's religious, and there we go, and that's the end of it. It's not. It's so less black and white than I think it was in my school. But hearing your conversation definitely shows that there is change happening, and it's really positive to see. So I won't spend any more time talking.
Thank you. There's a, if you check the chat out, if you weren't able to, and you can see the people applauding, there's a lot of love in the room for you.
I'm gonna have a little look now, because I'm on my phone, so it don't come up till the end.
And thank you for that. But I think one of the things that you said quite early on, and it was related to the bottom set, you know, the curse of setting and labels. I think, because actually it's not about the setting, it's about the labeling of people into sets. But I think the thing that really resonated with me, and I'd really sort of like to ask you, is if you hadn't, you clearly worked really, really hard to get those GCSEs, the GCSE grades that you got. I suppose the thing that, because we talk a lot in here about we need to be more human as an education system. We need to refocus onto, actually, we are a human industry and we're dealing with human beings. But the other thing we talk about is actually, what is education? You know, the spaces between the examinations, the spaces between the tests. That's where education actually happens.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I'm just currently screenshotting the whole chat so I can read it all later. Thank you so much for all these lovely messages, because I'm just having to screenshot them all. There we go. I'll show my ratchet face again. But yeah, I think education,
Sorry, Hannah, the key thing I want to ask you is, would it have been any different? Would you be any different at where you are now in terms of the age of 19, in terms of your clear skills, qualities, the things that you are and the things that you presented in this room today, if you didn't have those qualifications? That's the thing that
I guess it's a game of let's get the tarot cards out and see what would have happened. But I definitely think that without, you know, the exams, everything would have been different. And I think that definitely motivated me in some areas to prove that yes, I can do it, but I sold my soul and my happiness and my youth and my social life to gain that. So when it comes down to having, you get your results on paper and you leave, and those people never contact you again, and you're left with the piece of paper of 5 years of misunderstanding and of misconception and of scapegoating and of all these different things, and all you're given is a piece of paper. And how much is that worth when most of my education has either come out of, one, the work I do now, two, my parents and their life that they've lived. You know, I've learned more from my dad and my mum than I've learned in a system, because in all reality, if I can do my cube numbers, yeah, that's all well and good, but I don't need to present my knowledge of cube numbers, as much as that's relevant to the curriculum. But definitely separating this idea that education is a curriculum and that education is a set of exams that you take, that education is just you learning from lived experience, you learning from the people who have lived those things and what you choose to take on from that. My dad's one of my biggest inspirations, and he is just a French polisher and he just does all these little things, but I've learned more from him than I ever did in school for the 13 years I spent in school, and then there's 5 years in secondary and 2 years in college. But yeah, maybe everything wouldn't have been different, but I guess when you push yourself to the edge of the cliff and you don't jump off, all you've got to do is kind of go back and see what else you missed off.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point for me, is actually, so the key question is, do we need to do that? So do we need to push children to the nth degree for a set? And the reality is we don't, and we know we don't. That's the conflict.
University is seen as an end goal, and it's rather than just a sign in a wood. Yet there's so many other signs, and we kind of go, this is the only one, and exactly. That's obviously proven that that's not.
Dina, you have a reflection, a comment, or a question?
Of all, I've got to say, Hannah, a lot of that resonated with me. I was a child in bottom set. In fact, my tutor told my parents I'd be lucky if I was stacking shelves at Tesco's when I left school. And like you, I had parents that supported me and never let me give up. I actually feel quite emotional hearing your story. And this is why I am so adamant that change has to happen, and why together we need to, as head teachers, as senior leaders, as advocates for education, start to raise our voices, to take action, because the impact of my education system still impacts on me today. So something that might take me, should only take me an hour to prepare, I have huge anxieties that I'm not good enough at things, and it could take me weeks to do something that should only take me half an hour. But I still have my teachers telling me I'm bottom set and I'm 43 years old. And so education is for life. And what we teach children, how we treat children, what we say to children, every interaction we have with children has to be intentional, knowing that what you do will have an impact. So I want to say thank you for coming to share that today. I think you're absolutely phenomenal. But you and I are some of the lucky ones that, although we have these, imposter syndromes, these self-doubts, we had our parents that supported us. There are many children out there that didn't have that support and don't have that support, and so will fall through those cracks, and it's for them we need to do this for just as much.
And it's funny, exactly what you say, that for me, I'm one of the lucky ones. I made it out I'm the only person who passed any of my GCSEs in my whole 24 set. And time has proven that those people now live lives of pure day-to-day quick scores of fun and quick scores of drug abuse and things like that. Because where are they going to go? Where are you going to go when you're flung out of school at 16 and gone, okay, your choice? You're going to choose the thing that gives the quick rush because you've not had a long-term influence of someone going, if you think long-term, you're going to get long-term. And I'm so lucky, once again, that my parents are, you know, just regular people, but that's what makes them heroes. They get up and they do their job to help me and my brother. And that's, I guess, the main thing. But exactly like you say, you know, we are the lucky ones who have had the strong will to kind of go, let's see what would happen if we change that. So yeah, I completely agree.
Thank you, Gina, for that input, and Hannah for that response. Chris, what's resonating with you from the people? Scribbling things down and nodding and applauding.
Your volume and your voice has gone a bit funny now. I can't hear you.
Chris, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I heard you. Just enough. Yeah, I've got these plugged in so I can just about cope. Wow, rather a lot of things to reflect on as ever. Massive thanks firstly to Emma and Hannah for your contributions, which will do nothing other than drive us on in Heads Up to formulate our strategies. I think firstly on Emma's brilliant presentation, what I'm grateful for is a kind of living example of what we should be arguing for, because you've got there a curriculum that you're developing, and not only is it a great curriculum which has got sustainability running right through it, and which has really helped me personally in terms of thinking about what a sustainable curriculum looks like. But you also talked about the model in which you've achieved it, which is in your school, the sustainable leadership model, etc., which is fantastic. I have pervading through everything that I think about when we have these meetings is the how do we go about winning, and I say that to people a lot. But what you provided is such a brilliant example that I think we could present that, you know, and use that as a persuasion. So that was fantastic. Thank you ever so much for that, because I don't want to see, with all due respect to environmental sustainability, which is really important, I only want to see that as one part of the vehicle, you know, and I think that's what you talked about was brilliant. Hannah, I don't know where to start in thanking you for what you said to us today. You are a fantastic character. You clearly got so much going for you, and I see so many kids that I taught, you know. And I mean, I remember a deputy head I worked with years ago talking to me as head of sixth form saying, oh, two or three of the ones you've got coming through are from the bottom set. Isn't that fantastic that they're doing A-levels? And I just thought, oh, well, he was also the guy who said, we'll have computers in this school over my dead body. God rest his soul. Anyway, thank you for that, because that's so encouraging. And again, it made me think of two particular things. Nilakshi talked about employers, particularly in the law profession, saying we don't need these bits of paper, we need character, which, by the way, Hannah, you just oozed. And I think that's a massively important thing. But I have to say, it isn't anything new, is it? You know, you look at some of the people, whether you like them or not, and I'm not committing myself to that, but like your Sugars and your other business leaders in this world, and they are predominantly renegades, aren't they? They're predominantly people who did not succeed in the education system. Why has that not told us anything over the years about our education system? It's ridiculous how long it is taking us to see the obvious way forward. How can somebody like Hannah not succeed in school? That's clearly the education system's problem. So again, I wear the Edward de Bono's blue hat, apparently, which is the shaping hat or something, I don't know. And I'm constantly thinking about how do we use this to move forward. And I think that the issue there about the solidity of the curriculum that's been designed at the British School in Brussels. And also, I think here about a lesson we can learn about freeing up the voice of young people, and maybe aligning ourselves as a group to that, because there are so many different people who we can tap into. Obviously there are, you know, so from Hannah's of this world to the many kids I come across who are working brilliantly as mentors in schools, you know, who are kind of seen as poachers turned gamekeepers, you know, but they're just fantastic people who've got those talents. So I think there's a couple of things there, James, that I really want to home in on there, and that is us as a group being able to gather brilliant stuff like Emma's provided us with, and that brilliant message from Hannah about character and about how we tap into that.
Awesome, thank you, Chris, and hopefully you can hear me a bit better now. I'm happy
Yes,
to be back in.
yeah.
Thank you for that, Chris. I'm just conscious of the time. Is there anybody else who hasn't had a chance to sort of speak yet, want to signal in some way that they would like to say something to add? Nilakshi, thank you.
Thank you, everybody at Heads Up, and Emma, and definitely Hannah. You're so brave. I'm so proud and so honored to be part of this conversation today. The one thing that resonated with me with both presentations was an organization in the US called the Singularity organization, and they believe in impacting 1 billion people worldwide. And one of the founders has said about education that ask the child not what they want to become in life, but what problem they want to solve for the world, and then they get the relevant training around that. And having done work on the AIDS problem in South Africa, this is a huge cultural change. So you know, changing that entire mindset of parents, teachers, and the expectations from young people. Hannah mentioned that university is some kind of goalpost or the end post that has been set out. It's not actually that. It's about building a passion for solving problems in the world. And if we could steer education in that direction and train young people for that, it will be amazing.
And actually, you reminded me, I had a conversation with somebody about 3 months ago, and it was a head teacher. I'll have to try and remember which school it was, but that's what they were building their curriculum around.
Fantastic.
What is the problem that you would like to solve in the world? That was the overall, and I just thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Because actually you can still include all of the content, but my God, what a great way. And the problem could be a community problem. The problem could be, it could be really local to the school.
Yes.
You know, but it could be something much bigger. And I thought, what a way of engaging young people in subject knowledge and developing the skills that and the attitudes and everything. But as an overarching thing for brilliant. What's the problem you want to solve? Oh my God. Yeah, really. And actually, thank you so much for that input and for reminding me of that as well. I'll have to try and remember which school it was. Kate, I think you were going to come in, were you? Did you put your hand when I said, does anybody want to say something?
Yeah, just a lot. I'm just really conscious of time. I'm blown away. I'm absolutely blown away tonight. Hannah, it really deeply upsets me that there are such amazing people and our education system fails people like you. And I think what you have achieved and your attitude to life, just the fact that you've come so far, yet you've been through so much, it's just incredible, mate. Absolutely incredible. You blow me away. I had a question for Emma. When you were talking about your curriculum, you mentioned that you know, how a curriculum really needs to be able to sort of survive uncertainty and volatile situations. And I just thought, what is it about your curriculum that allows for that? Because we were talking in the chat about how rigid the national curriculum is and how, you know, we have one little bump and it all goes to pot. But what is it specifically? I wondered whether it was because it focuses on values and skills as opposed to knowledge.
I think that's part of it, but what comes to mind first though is actually doing less better, because I don't think there's time. I mean, we know currently our curriculum, it's not where we want it to be. It is, we do far too much, and it's a checklist of, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. Next week we need to do that, you know, that's on the plan, we've got to get through everything. We don't give enough time to doing anything in much depth that allows you to sometimes go off piste, or to let other things in when it's really important. You know, if there's a natural disaster, what a great opportunity to talk about it. Yeah, but we're doing such and such this week. We can't talk about the earth, you know, because that's not on the plan.
Yes, but you've just defined
the
national curriculum.
Yeah, so we've really got to create that space, and that's, you know, we've really got to teach less.
Even if there's not time for phonics. Yeah.
Where would we be without phonics?
Doing less better is a mantra that we should all take on, I think.
Yeah, and Kelly's just put in the chat as well, slowness in learning. You know, I kind of think that culture under like a systematic level of short-termism and rapid transformation is kind of, it's sort of grabbed hold, it's taken the sort of education by the throat, I think, and everything has to be full power, everything has to be full speed, and it's kind of like, just slow it down a little bit and do some, Emma, as you say, just do less and do it better, and slowness in learning, and enabling young people to make those connections, you know, to different bits of their learning. I think, you know, if we create a space to do that, then that would be awesome.
Just say, I think that it's symptomatic in our education system is the amount of times that a government will ask the schools to bolt cross-curricular themes, whatever it might be, onto things. You know, we had a bad time with riots and that, so we've all got to do British values, and Ofsted will do you if you don't do it, even though we only told you to do it last week. We all know what it's like, and that surely is a symptom of the problem, and that if you've got a more sustainable curriculum, you wouldn't have to do that.
And I would also say, in relation to what Hannah's been saying, is building relationships is also key. You have to know the students. You really got to invest time. And that's another thing, you know, we're really thinking about, do we really, should our year 7 people see so many different, should our year 7 people see so many different teachers and so on?
And I guess, sorry, I interrupted you there, the lag on my phone's not very good, but in the sense of, if, you know, if education is so dehumanized, why don't we have a bunch of robots teaching? Because that's exactly how it feels. It's a bunch of robots saying the same thing. If we're going to have education is from life, and if you're learning from the life experience of humans rather than built machines that will teach you this is cubed by this, and this is a waterfall of this, and this is the geographic of this, we might as well just have a bunch of robots teaching and being a whiteboard, and then people go home. And
we've you know, we talked about that. I think it's a really good point, Hannah, and I love the fact that you keep pulling us back to this sort of actually humanizing rather than dehumanizing, because I actually think, I wrote a piece a few weeks ago, but I think that's at the heart of the problem with our education system, is ultimately young people, actually anybody, we are complex because we are human, and we are more complex when you put us all together in large communities. We become even more complex. And so that level of complexity, the trouble is that in order to measure the success of the education system, the DFE essentially has taken the path of, well, essentially, if we want to do that, and we want to do that really well, and we want to do that really quickly, first of all, we need a test that enables us to do that: phonics, SATs, GCSEs, A levels. And the second thing is, what we need to do is push people to dehumanize their organizations in order to be able to improve those. So it all becomes about chasing numbers, which you alluded to, rather than having great relationships with young people in your organization. And I think, well, I do think there is an essence of our education system. It's just become broadly dehumanized. I think you're absolutely spot on. You know,
with animals, I think one thing that I always, sorry, my lag is so terrible, it always kind of cuts off, and then we're all animals. One thing I wrote a piece about recently is that, and this pandemic really, you know, came to me, that we are animals, and when structure's stripped away, what do animals do? They start to cling on to other animals, they start to cling on the company of others. And if we see ourselves more animalistic than we are, rather than this kind of technological group of people, we'll realise that there's inner animal in all of us. And what do animals want? They want company. And I think if we adopted that kind of idea in the education system, maybe we'd see, your better mental health and things like that.
I think Isabella wanted to say something as well. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Izzy.
Oh, it's okay. No, I just want to say a massive thank you for allowing young people into your space as professionals and as SLT and head teachers. I just think, like Hannah, you know, normally people that have been failed by the education system, I went into teaching, but disliked it because of the school experiences that I had, which is why I now go into youth work and program managing, and go down that third sector route. But I just think it's amazing to have young people in these spaces, you know, breaking down the barriers, creating those relationships, and listening, learning, but not only just doing that, but making like pacting to do something now about it, and then how to put that within your curriculums or within your schools and within your feeder schools. But thank you for creating those spaces for our young people to speak about that, because I think when you hear it from experience, I think that's when the change happens. That's when people start to do things about it, or think actually, yeah, coming away from the busy lives and, you know, the fact of it's grades all the time. How can we now look to, you know, into well-being, into the pastoral side of things, into, you know, like Hannah said, not the robot side of things. And yeah, I think it's about bringing character and things like that within to it in roles like that. But yeah, thank you so much for creating these spaces.
No, thank you, and thank you, Isabella and Becky, for recommending such a great speaker to us, because I think we all agreed that Hannah's been absolutely brilliant. So I'm gonna start to wrap it up. So the first thing I'm going to say is thank you for your participation, thank you for your authenticity, thank you for turning up as you, all of you, and being your authentic selves. It's really appreciated. Just a reminder that we switch back into on Saturday our normal sort of head teacher support meeting sessions, and next Wednesday will be a head teacher support session. Just a reminder of that this has been one of our Hopes for Education events, as opposed to one of those, which is very different in style, although it's just as open and transparent and authentic as this one has been. We are going to start asking you, we'd like to ask you to pledge, please. So at the end of each of these sessions, we're going to ask you to make, what's your Hopes for Ed pledge? What's your heads up pledge? So whatever your role is in this room, and if you could put it into the chat, please. So, you know, whether it's based around the curriculum and the input that Emma has given us, or whether actually it's off the back of the input from Hannah, which actually ties really nicely back to Hopes for Ed number 1, which was about a big education. I think, you know, it really again resonated with me about thinking about actually how much of an education, or how much of a conversation are we having with our young people in our communities, in our schools, about the education that they would like to see, and are we having a conversation with all of the young people, or are we having a conversation with just one or two of them, or you know, the academic ones, the ones who do well, the ones who present well? Are we really getting that diversity? So pledges, please, on those two things. So Hopes for Ed number 1. So your heads up pledge, Hopes for Ed number 1, about a big conversation. And Hopes for Ed number 2, your curriculum and creating a space where young people can thrive in life, not exams. So if you could just take a reflective moment, and you could do 2 if you want, or you just want to do 1. And we're going to start using these to generate some noise on social media, and to sort of reflect them back to the 1,700 odd other head teachers that are in the network that aren't here tonight, so that we can start to get more people engaged in these sorts of conversations, and more of the head teachers who are in the network engaged in this type of conversation as well. And whilst you're doing that, I am going to finish with a huge thank you to Emma first. Thank you. What I didn't say is that Brussels is clearly on Central European time. So they are an hour ahead of us. So it's 8:30 for us, but it's 9:30 for Emma. And we started at 7, but Emma started at 8. So Emma, a hat off to you, metaphorical hat off to you. Thank you so much for coming in and doing that presentation at the end of what's been a long day for you. And I think people really appreciated the input and really appreciated having a look at what the great work that's happening at BSB. So thank you. A big round of applause for Emma, please, around the room. That would be great. And a big thank you to Hannah as well. Hannah, I think you've really inspired people in the room and actually reconnected us with our humanity and you know, the values with which we come into education with, and the values that we should continue to hold on to as we move through education. So you know, that your everything that you sort of prompted and provoked us about, I think has really resonated with lots of people in the room. And if we can find you other platforms to have that voice, then we are more than happy to do that as well. And if you can find
have a book
others
coming out in February, if anyone wants it, I can link you all onto that.
Well, I think you've sold a few already. There were people in the chat asking, so I think you might have sold a few versions, copies of
my email's in the chat. If I have put it in there, if anyone was interested in buying it when when it goes into printing, I can definitely hold a couple of things back if people wanted that.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody. If you didn't get a chance to speak, apologies if I didn't get to you, or if, also fine, as it always is in our heads up meetings. If you just wanted to sit and listen, that is also absolutely fine. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But if you did want to say something and you didn't have a chance to, then I apologise for that. But I look forward to seeing you all at our next Heads Up support session, Saturday morning, coffee morning. Bring a coffee, bring yourself, and get support from other head teachers in the Heads Up network. And our next event will be, I've just realised, gosh, after Christmas, because I don't think we're doing one on. We're not doing one on December the 23rd, are we, Kate?
Unless you are, darling. No, 13th of January.
I'm not.
I think.
December the 23rd
of January.
Yeah, I will have had a drink or two on December the 23rd at this particular time, because it's my,
I would hope so.
Yeah, I'm definitely not doing one, but if you guys want to show up, that's great. You've all been wonderful as always. Thank you for the contributions, thank you for the support, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thanks everyone.
Very much,
Bye
guys.
everyone, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you. Well done.
Later.